Ever since I completed Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I've wanted to make a video ranking all Mario Kart games from worst to best. I put it off for a long time, and when I replayed all the games and started making this list, I found it pretty hard to rank some of them due to how close they were in terms of how much I liked them. Still, I decided to rank them based on how good the handling, course design and graphics were, how much they improved over the previous entries, how much content they had, and how much I personally enjoyed playing them. So of course this list is gonna be rather subjective. Also keep in mind that since I'm only gonna rank the mainline Mario Kart games, I'm not gonna include Mario Kart Tour, Home Circuit and the arcade only versions. And just like any other ranker, I'm gonna count 8 and 8 Deluxe as one game. I'd also like to mention that I'm gonna prioritize Grand Prix over Battle Mode when evaluating the games, simply because I never really liked or played Battle Mode nearly as much as the Grand Prix or Time Trial mode. And with that out of the way, let's start from the very bottom. Number 8. Super Mario Kart. As Nintendo's first attempt at a kart racing game, it should come as no surprise that it ranked this low. The graphics are really simple, which is understandable given that it was made for the SNES, and the courses are quite repetitive, though this could be excused too, given that the developers may have been trying to save space by reusing assets. But what absolutely cannot be excused is the terrible control scheme. For some reason, both of the shoulder buttons were used for power sliding, while B was used for accelerating and A for items. This makes it impossible to use items without either stopping for a moment or putting your right hand into a really uncomfortable position. Even Y for accelerating and B for items would have been a better setup. Other than that, despite ranking the lowest on the list, it's not a bad game by any means, which just goes to show how good of a franchise Mario Kart is. It was definitely a good game for its time, and even today it can be somewhat fun to play, especially on an emulator since you can map the buttons however you want. Number 7. Mario Kart Super Circuit. This one was actually my very first Mario Kart game, so I have a lot of memories attached to it, mostly of me being really bad at it. The graphics and sound quality aren't great by modern standards, and the handling doesn't feel as good as other games in the series. But what I do like about the game is the amount of content it has. There are 5 main cups, which is already higher than any Mario Kart before it, and 20 extra tracks, and while unlike the retro courses in the newer games, they're made from reused assets from the main cups, I still think they're a nice addition to the game. Also, unlike Super Mario Kart, it actually has a good control scheme, and was the first Mario Kart to feature non-split screen multiplayer, which I've only tried a few times with just one person, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. Number 6. Mario Kart 64. Considering that this is Nintendo's first attempt at an actual 3D Mario Kart, it's a pretty solid game. It has a decent course selection and the split screen multiplayer mode can be really fun. The 3D graphics don't look that good by today's standards, but I personally didn't enjoy the game any less because of that. If anything, the rather boring design of some of the courses is a bigger weakness of this game than the graphics. My biggest complaint about it though is the handling. This might be because I'm more used to the more modern Mario Karts, but the entire time you're driving it feels like you're on ice. And at least to me, drifting in Mario Kart 64 is really hard. Not only do you slide too much when trying to drift, most of the time it doesn't feel like there's enough space anywhere for such drifts to be of any use. Also, the red shells barely work, which is quite annoying. Still, I'm ranking it higher than the previous two because the 3D courses make it more interesting to play. Number 5. Double Dash. When it was first released in 2003, it was a huge improvement over the previous games in some areas, but a bit of a downgrade in others. The graphics were arguably the biggest improvement, and the handling was greatly improved as well. However, I still found a few things a bit disappointing. Firstly, there wasn't as much content as in the previous game, with only 4 cups compared to 5 main and 5 extra cups in Super Circuit, which is especially disappointing when you consider how much more powerful the GameCube is compared to the Game Boy Advance. However, the actual design of the courses was a huge improvement over all the previous games. And it's the first Mario Kart with courses I could confidently say I really like to this day. Wario Coliseum, for example, is still one of my favorites, and the Rainbow Road is amazing too. In fact, I liked it so much that I actually tried speedrunning it for fun at one point. This is also the first game in the franchise to use actual 3D models for the karts, and some of the designs are really cool. Other than that, I don't like how they changed the control scheme again and used X and Y for items instead of the L button, like in Super Circuit. Also, I personally found the whole 2 character per kart thing to be nothing more than a gimmick. And while I guess it's nice that different characters have special items only they can use, I still don't like how you can't hold items behind you to protect yourself from red shells. Number 4. Mario Kart 7. The 2 games that came before this one were really good, so naturally they set high expectations for this game. And while Mario Kart 7 did deliver on those expectations in some areas, it disappointed in others. Let's start with the positives. The kart handling is, in my opinion, better than in any game before it, and it's almost just as good as Mario Kart 8's handling. The course designs are nice, but with the exception of Rainbow Road, I wouldn't say that they're much better than Wii or DS courses. It's also really easy, and it's actually the first Mario Kart which I fully completed by getting 3 stars in every single cup. One thing I didn't like is how your and the other player's time taken to complete the 3 laps isn't shown after each race, because I really liked seeing how much I improved with each lap and how close or how far I was from losing or winning the race. The only notable things Mario Kart 7 introduced are the gliders and the partially underwater courses, and while I do recognize that they added a bit more variety to the gameplay, I felt like they made the game feel a bit less like Mario Kart, if that makes sense. That's just my personal opinion though. Ironically enough, I didn't feel this way about bikes in Wii, and I kinda wished 7 also had bikes. Number 3. Mario Kart DS. This is the first Mario Kart game which I don't have any major complaints about. It was the very first game in the series to feature online play, as well as retro courses not made from reused assets. What's especially cool is that some of the retro courses came from Double Dash, a game made for a more powerful console. The new courses were amazing too. Among them are some of the most beloved courses in the series, like Waluigi Pinball, Tick-Tock Clock, and Airship Fortress. It also has a lot of karts to choose from, and the designs are some of my favorite in the entire franchise. There's even an excavator, how cool is that? I also liked the graphics. Sure, they're pixelated, but that's not a big deal when you're playing on the DS with its 2.5-inch screen, and the actual 3D models are really nice. The kart handling is okay, even good I'd say, but not as good as Wii or 8 for example. But again, I'm probably biased since I'm more used to the kart handling in the more recent games. One minor complaint I have is that the time it took other racers to complete the race isn't shown like in the previous games, though I do appreciate that at least they show your race time. Now, I've covered 6 games so far, so there are only 2 left, namely Mario Kart Wii and 8, and out of all the games in the franchise, I found those 2 the hardest to rank. They were both in my top 2, but it was really hard to decide which one's better. You see, I really liked both games, and while I had no complaints about the Wii version whatsoever, I did think there were a few things Mario Kart 8 could have done better. For example, I wish they showed your and the other player's time to complete each race, just like in the older games. And the trophy ceremony, or lack of thereof, was a bit disappointing. It was also relatively easy compared to the older games, so I got less playtime out of it. And I had mixed feelings about the anti-gravity mode and some of the course designs, especially the retro ones like GBA Mario Circuit, Ribbon Road and Cheeseland. They were so different from the original that I didn't even recognize them as the same courses before racing through them several times. I also didn't really like how Lucky 2 doesn't let you fall into the abyss anymore, because to me that was one of the most iconic things about Mario Kart. and a few other minor things, like the fact that you can drive up to Peach's castle's doorway in the remake of N64 Royal Raceway. I felt that Mario Kart 8 strayed a bit too far from the original concept in course design and some other areas. But at the same time, I recognized that Nintendo had to introduce at least something to prevent the series from becoming too repetitive. And after replaying all the games including Mario Kart 8, I came to realize that I didn't actually find the last game any worse than Wii. In fact, I think I've grown to like it more in some areas. I also thought about how if Nintendo didn't change as many things in Mario Kart 8, I probably would have complained about it not being innovative enough, and would have liked it even less. So I'd say in terms of course design and gameplay, Wii and 8 are equal, but the tipping point that made me rank Mario Kart 8 as first and Wii as second was the amount of content the games had. You see, Mario Kart 8 was a fantastic game. It introduced bikes, tricks, and 12-player races, and I think its graphics were perfectly suited for a Nintendo kart racing game. They were the perfect blend of realism, if you could call it that, and simplicity. The courses were really memorable, but there were only 32 of them. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, meanwhile, there were 48 courses in the base game, and for $25, which is more than twice as cheap as the base game, you could get 48 more, among which are many of the best new and retro courses in the entire franchise, which is one of the main reasons why I'm ranking it as the #1 Mario Kart game of all time. Obviously, the price to content ratio isn't the only reason why I've ranked it this high. It also has the best card handling out of all the games, and feels very satisfying to play, especially at 200cc. It also has the most distinct soundtrack out of all the games, and Bowser's Castle theme is my favorite out of all Mario Kart songs. One complaint some people may have is that online multiplayer isn't free, but that's more of an issue with the Nintendo Switch and 8th gen consoles in general, rather than Mario Kart 8 specifically. So, as you may have noticed, how well the games ranked is quite proportional to when they were released and how powerful the consoles for which they were released are. Which I guess just goes to show how skilled Nintendo devs are at utilizing their console's hardware to its full potential. But again, this list is subjective, so I wanna know what you guys think. How would you rank all the Mario Kart games you've played? There are 40,320 ways you could possibly rank all the mainline Mario Kart games, and I'm curious to see which orders are the most common. Maybe if I had a bot that could compile and analyze data from different ranking videos, I would have been able to find out. Next time I might try ranking all the Mario Kart trophy ceremonies, or maybe even rank games from other franchises.